Welcome to Champagne Problems. We're your hosts, Robbie Shaw and Charlotte Cameron. Thank you for joining us on this journey as we explore our mental health, well-being, performance, and longevity, and how our relationships with alcohol can influence each. No shame, no labeling, no judgment, just curiosity. Welcome back, all you truth seekers. Boy, do we have a special one for you today. In a moment, we're going to be speaking with Calum Morrison, founder of the Extraordinary Adventure Club. Calum spent his early life in the Highlands of Scotland, where he immersed himself in nature and was a member of the mountain rescue team at the ripe age of 15. He then was an instructor for Outward Bound for a number of years, and then trained and joined the Royal Military, which is some of the hardest training you can do in the UK. In 2010, he founded Extraordinary Adventure Club, which provides bespoke and revolutionary programs of self-discovery and self-mastery in remote wilderness locations. What does that entail, you may ask? Let's go to Calum. Calum Morrison, welcome to Champagne Problems.
Thank you. Thanks very much, and a pleasure to join you guys here from the Highlands of Scotland, and for having me.
Yes, absolutely. We're very excited to have you on and learn all about not only the company and what all you do there, but really I'm excited to dig into your why and why you created this and the mission and the people you serve. So that is exciting for us because I already know a little bit, but I'm anxious to dig deeper. But first, we're going to get to know you a little bit. So we've got a couple of really fun questions for you, Calum.
Okay. Go ahead.
All right,
I'm not very good at talking about myself, but here we go.
They're pretty easy.
Nothing too complicated.
Pretty easy. The first question is, what was the first live music concert and where?
First live music concert was in Eden Court Theatre in Inverness to a band called Powerage, I think they were called. There's a friend of mine at school who was very much into his music, and it was wasn't really my style of music, but some very electro pop band. And I think so this would have been in the early 80s, wasn't really my scene. And I think judging by the number of people who were there, it wasn't really the scene of too many others either. So
Powerage,
yeah, with a I remember it had a lightning.
Powerage. Love it.
Lightning sort of stroke. But then the first proper concert was Motorhead.
Ooh, nice.
In Glasgow.
All right. What food is your guilty pleasure?
My guilty pleasure, it would be crisps in whatever form that is. So chips and chocolate. It'd be very difficult to decide between the two if I had to, which one that would be, but dark chocolate.
Yeah, me too on crisps. Any fried potato really, but in particular crisps absolutely. In the UK and it's just so much better than America.
Yeah, we eat millions of tons of the stuff over here, so each year.
Yeah.
Good one. All right. What can make you lose your temper?
Generally, it takes quite a lot for me to lose my temper. I'm blessed with a significant amount of patience. I think for me, it's probably an attention to detail or a lack of an attention to detail would make me lose my temper. But very rarely does that happen. Or if pushed into a corner, would also make me lose my temper. You know, if you push me into a corner, the answer is always no.
Yeah.
That resonates with me.
Yeah. Well, I imagine with your background and your experiences, you've got to practice a little bit of control.
Yeah, absolutely, and try not to. I think losing one's temper is not necessarily a good thing. Sometimes it works, and there's been times in my life where losing my temper has been a positive, but more often than not, you don't make good decisions when your temper's gone.
No.
Yeah. No. What is your favorite word to describe things that you like?
Simple. Simplicity, simple pleasures, simple things. Life's not necessarily too complicated. Happiness isn't complicated. It's those simple things, and recognizing those. I think we seek increasingly complicated ways of achieving happiness or satisfaction when actually it's a simple thing. You know, sitting outside in a beautiful sunset or bird song, or for me, very much joined to a connection to nature and being in wild spaces, sitting with good friends, or a good book. But simplicity, I think, would be the word that I would use.
I like that.
Golly, that's good. Great answer. Uncommon answer.
Yeah.
All right, last but not least, if you could know the answer to any question, what would you ask?
I think, partly, and I'm going to, rather than any large sort of esoteric or philosophical question, that my children, would be okay, and that they'll be happy and fulfilled going forward in their lives. I think to know that, part of the joy is the unexpected and watching as they develop and things happen and how they react to it. So I think having things predicted is not necessarily a good thing, but for my own sense of self as a father, I think that would be one that I would ask as a question. Another one that I ask myself often and have used and sat with shaming in the jungle, or witch doctor in a part of Africa, or spiritual leaders elsewhere, is, am I on the right path? I think that's another question that I've asked myself, and I've not had a definitive answer, and I'm still on it, and I'm still wondering. So
it's still like that answer.
In both senses of the word.
Yeah. Well, the answer's got to be yes. You just have to believe it.
Yeah, true. Yeah, sometimes you wonder though.
Yep.
Shit, am I
really
the right thing that I'm doing? Am I on the right path?
Love it. All right. Well, now we know you. So let's move on.
Is that it done now? That's a short podcast.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. No, let's hear it from you. I'd like to know a little bit of your background. Where you're from, but more importantly, what led you to where you are now, if that's somehow easy to summarize.
Grew up in primarily for much of my life in the Highlands of Scotland and in the mountains, and if not there, we spent a bit of time in the south of England, escaping to the mountains at every opportunity. So a lot of my life has been involved in exploring those places and feeling the benefit of that, though, when you're younger, not necessarily able to articulate what that means, and having adventures from an early age, whether it's my father thinking that he's an early version of Ray Mears or Bear Grylls and taking us on an adventure sort of survival thing, and properly having to survive because his organization was rubbish and he wasn't a survival expert, as we quickly found out, to climbing, at an early age. I was in a mountain rescue team up here from the age of about 15.
Oh, wow.
And spending my time just being and living in the outdoors. And it wasn't until I worked at Outward Bound, I did a number of expeditions when I was in my sort of 18, 19, went off to Panama and hiked across the isthmus from the Atlantic to the Pacific through the jungle, and lived on a coral island, was out there for about 3 months, and then came back and worked at Outward Bound. And it was whilst there seeing the impact of being in the outdoors, or creating a curated experience, and the impact that can have on an individual in terms of shaping them, greatly, and the impact and the outcomes from actually what is quite a simple process of leaving people on their own in an unfamiliar environment and dislocating their expectations. And seeing at that stage, we had some guys who'd been in trouble with the law at a young age, and they came back, and 1 or 2 of them were crying about the impact on their family or their community and what that actually meant. And for me, thinking, wow, fuck me, this is then just going out doing what I'm doing on for fun, and so that then planting a seed for what I now do but you have to go off and have your own adventures and find the edges of yourself. I called it the Extraordinary Adventure Club because I believe that the most extraordinary adventure is the exploration of oneself, finding the edges of yourself and stretching that, thereby shaping change. And for me, that manifested itself in hitching across Africa when I left university, from Morocco to South Africa, sort of hitching and traveling and working out there. Ended up down in Cape Town and came back to join the Royal Marines as an officer, and go through that training, which at the time was the longest and arguably hardest initial military training. And for me, it was about finding the edges of myself. What are you capable of doing? Recognizing that your mind gives out before your body does. What it is that motivates people in an extreme environment, why they fight, what drives them, and what you're capable of, and really pushing yourself and really challenging yourself in a way. I don't have any military background. I was never involved in any sort of organization like that, but for me, it was a pure kind of expression of that exploration of myself.
Well, I was curious what you were the most surprised to discover about yourself during that process.
I think what I was capable of, actually, what you're capable of doing, and creating the right mindset. So it's all about mindset. It's all in your head. It's not necessarily, yes, you've got to have a physical ability, but it's the ability to develop resilience and a self-sufficiency and a confidence that you have, and that confidence coming from building competency and skill, and at each moment you build that confidence by doing something that you didn't think possible. And then what else can I do? And if I do that, then what else can I do? And if your body will do whatever you ask it to, you've just got to ask it the right questions. And it's about framing those questions in a particular way during that period that allows you to overcome things that you didn't think possible for yourself. So I think that was it, and how quickly you can build a group of individuals that are absolutely fundamentally connected to each other. And that was over 30 years ago that I went through commando training, and they're still, my closest friends now. Yeah. They're like brothers. There's an authenticity in a relationship like that. You can be yourself. Mm-hmm. Because everybody's seeing you at the very essence of your being. So there's no ego necessarily. You get called out on that. So I think that was the thing that you could just within a pretty short space of time, and that the development of a dark humor to overcome anything, and just innate confidence that you have to be to deal with any situation. Wow. And then that carries it through with you and to now, and I was speaking to one of my friends from that time now, and about how, operating on the edge of chaos and enjoying that and being comfortable with that, and the ability to keep pushing through, just improvise, adapt, and overcome, and just do that. So for me, that was a real learning. And it's also kind of going from climbing traveling guy, with no sort of living in the desert in Namibia before I flew back to start military training and having to get my hair cut. And I remember my first line of my first ever report, where they used to read it to you, and then you would have the chance to read it, and you'd both sign. And the first line of my first ever report in the military was that Lieutenant Morrison has got a very unmilitary bearing and outlook. And I said, "Oh, thank you very much, sir." And he looked at me and he went, It's not a fucking compliment. Yeah.
That's right.
Right, okay, I'll try and be less military.
Today's episode is sponsored by Athletic Brewing Company, America's leading non-alcoholic craft brewer. Have you been thinking about cutting back on alcohol but still aren't sure if near beers are for you? Check out Athletic Brewing, the most decorated non-alcoholic brewer in the world. Athletic produces a wide selection of great tasting brews, including IPAs, Goldens, Darks, Lights, Sours, and more. Their non-alcoholic beers have won over 70 awards and are fit for all time, so you can drink them anytime and anywhere. Now you can enjoy great tasting craft brews all night long and still be ready for whatever life throws at you tomorrow. Right now, new Athletic customers can receive 20% off their first order when they visit athleticbrewing.com and use the code CP20 at checkout by August 31st, 2023. I mean, all of this is leading up to the company and what you do for people inside of the company. But I do want to go back and ask one quick question. When you provide the context of your childhood and the things the adventures you were on and the unintentional survival, that you were going through out in the wilderness, how much did that prepare you for the Royal Marines? I mean, obviously, I know the obvious answer, that it prepared you to some degree because you're pushed to your limits in various ways. But when you got to that level of training, which we know is super hard, and in America, it's the Navy SEALs and the Special Forces that we hear about all the time, but we also hear how extremely hard it is. So were you prepared maybe more than others as a result of your upbringing?
Yeah, I think in some sense that helped because being comfortable with the uncomfortable. So when you're out climbing in the winter here in Scotland, you know, you're piss wet through, you're tired, you're sleeping in a shitty sleeping bag, you know, or you bivvied out somewhere, and you know, you have to endure a degree of hardship and get up in the morning and look after your equipment, you know, and look after yourself. You buddied up with your climbing partner, all those sorts of things that you. So yes, that definitely helped. And being outside and being comfortable, sort of living outside and working. I grew up on a small farm, and my mother's Norwegian, and she's hard as nails and has a particular kind of work ethic too. That I think then, that helps. And you know that I suppose in some ways there's a similar with those guys that I was in training with. You know, there's a similar core of us, or core of our individual characters that is similar. And that the training kind of shapes that, sees the potential, and then develops that potential for you. But yeah, there's still moments when you're lying in bed and, you know, your body's aching and you just think, oh, you know, I can't, you know, or particularly on holiday where you've had a bit of time off and then you think, oh, I'm going to go back, and I know on the first day I'm going to get thrashed in the water and being run up and down sand dunes and all that kind of thing and be throwing up or whatever it might be. But yeah, it did prepare, and I did quite a lot of competitive running and athletics when I was younger, so that sort of helps the physical element. But your body changes, and you know, you end up building muscle in places you didn't even know you had muscle, so certainly it set me up for life, and that's all I ever wanted, was to have an experience with that. I didn't really want to be in it for a long period of time. I wanted to have adventures and continue with that thread and use that as a kind of springboard. I was always quite intentional with that, and when I left, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I carried these stories with me, and I believe, you know, stories are a measure of success, and for me they certainly are. And you know, our lives are shaped by stories, and experiences create those. So when I left, I didn't really know what I was going to do, and I remember my wife and I, Isla, we were married and we had our first daughter. I've got 3 daughters, and I remember sitting in a bath in our flat in our apartment in the south of England with about a month to go, and her coming in and saying, well, what are you going to do? You're leaving the military, you've been in it for 8 years, you haven't got anything to go to. And I'd gone to you know, the interviews for the usual sort of route, which was like management consulting or some consulting of some sort, or some military affiliated industry, but I didn't want to do any of those things, and I knew what I didn't want to do. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And as we're sitting there, and she's giving me a Paddington Bear stare about what's going to happen in the future and the responsibilities that I have, a letter arrived, and it was from the Foreign Office, and it basically said, you know, your name's come up. Would you be interested in going to observe the Russian-Chechen conflict and spill over in the Caucasus Mountains? So in Georgia. So I disappeared off there for 15 months, living in the Caucasus Mountains.
Wow, and wild timing.
Lived out there for, and anyway, in sort of my work then thereafter had been very much being in those sorts of environments and kind of liaison, wondering, or working with individuals in terms of what makes people tick, and affecting mutually beneficial outcomes.
As you do 8 years in the Royal Marine, and then you do some more pretty high intense consulting work. My curiosity is around how long that continues to translate over into your life going forward. And what I mean by that is I've done nothing as extreme as you have, but in my own relative terms, you know, I push myself to the limits. And I learn from that, and I gain confidence from that. And there's certain parts of my life where I can say, hey, well, at least I did that, so I'm still kind of a badass, you know. But it doesn't last that long for me. I have to continue it. I have to keep going out and pushing myself and practicing that, or working that muscle, so to speak. How is that for you? You know, after going through some of those very, very intense, maybe some of the most intense that anyone can go through, how long does that continue to move you and create confidence in you going forward in your life?
I think it stays. I think it stays with you. It becomes layered into the framework of your life. So I think it stays with you. I think it then creates this kind of skeleton of confidence that you can then rely upon regardless of what's going on. So the experiences that you have then, you can draw on those and think, well, okay, I'm the person who has done X or Y or Z, and that then allows me to, and I don't feel frightened by. So I do think that topping it up every now and then does sort of help, but you have this framework and this skeleton and this deeply embedded confidence that allows you to then feel comfortable in those environments, and comfortable going to those places. And so I think you get to a level where it's innate, and then to top yourself up. I mean,
so you're saying I need to push myself a little further, is what you're saying?
Yeah, no. Yes, I'm not inferring anything, but I think having those, and challenging oneself. It was a friend of mine who was at a talk about somebody who was talking about courage, and she stuck up her hand and said, "When's the last time you did anything courageous?" And he couldn't answer. So I think it's about being authentic too, in part of that, doing those things that satisfy you and are part of your DNA, and not resting on your laurels. It's not necessarily what you've done, it's what you can still do that's interesting.
Well, we'll get into your company and how it works, but I know a little bit, but knowing that you're setting experiences up for people, all the time, I understand. Are you still putting yourself into new extreme situations to continue that path, or are you now able to mostly enjoy watching other people go through that process?
Well, I've tried enjoying watching other people go through that process, and I enjoy being in those environments. I think, as I've got older and as we've grown, it's been difficult necessarily to do that, but I love being out. Is why I started it. I love being out with those individuals, seeing that and helping them in shaping that transformation, but also being in those environments is where I feel alive, where I feel happiest. Isla will not worry about me if I'm in Libya or in some jungle somewhere, but she will if I go to London or some big city, because I'm probably more at home.
Much more dangerous.
Much more dangerous, and much more at home in those environments. So I do still enjoy and go with clients rather than watching on the sidelines. I think the sort of vicarious experience is nowhere near as good as the actual, as the visceral.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's dive in. Let's go to EAC. Let's talk about it. I would love to know. First of all, let's tell our listeners kind of the gist of the mission and what you're providing people.
Yeah. So essentially, we're pioneers in the personal development space with an expertise in curating these bespoke experiential therapeutic and developmental programs, to fit a broad spectrum of individual needs and requirements, and we disrupt the kind of standardized approach that exists in those therapeutic developmental models by dislocating and having quite a dynamic framework within extraordinary wilderness, often the wilderness of remote settings, and utilize this blend of developmental and therapeutic methodologies within this experiential framework that drives positive change for individuals and small groups. And we do that all over the world. We've worked on 5 continents over the last 12, 13 years with a diverse group of individuals primarily, and also selected small groups. But we're big on resilience and self-sufficiency, and support them in creating change, lasting change, and writing new life narratives for themselves. So whatever they do with us is not a punctuation point, but part of an ongoing narrative arc.
What does that process look like? I mean, I imagine somebody reaches out and I mean, really, let's walk through a little bit. I know it's different for every person based on what they're looking for or the situation they find themselves in when they reach out to you, but what does that generally look like? How does that unfold? And what kind of people do you have on your team that help curate this experience?
Sure. So it usually starts with a phone call, and it's to me or one of the team, saying that I'd heard about. We work on on a referral basis, word of mouth, and with either an issue regarding themselves. More often it's about a family member, and we'll have a conversation around what it is that we can do and what the issues are, and how we might help, and how we might support them in resolving that, or scratching the itch that they have, or addressing the issue. It'll then start with a period of onboarding and engagement with us in terms of further discussions and ensuring that they're suitable to come with us, because there's a degree of physical ability. It doesn't have to be huge, but there's a degree of physical ability that's required, and a degree of stability too, if we're going into remote spaces. We will work, sometimes it's a clinical team that will call us, so we'll work alongside the clinical medical team too. Invariably, they'll come to us in Scotland, Northern Norway, or Mallorca, which is a place that we operate from. Primarily, it's been Scotland, and then we'll run a kind of baseline engagement with them, which will then allow us to identify further, what the issues are, what are the events or the issues that have created the behaviours that are now not serving. What do they want their future to look like? How committed are they to it? So we can help them sort of unpick and then also look forward. And within that short engagement, which is sort of 5 days long, there can be up to 6 of us working with them in a location that's pretty remote, in that there's no phone signal. We take watch and phones off, so they disconnect to reconnect with themselves. There's a degree of dislocation, because that provides a degree of leverage, and then that will allow us to then determine what we're going to do next and how we're going to do it. The team that we have is multidisciplinary team of experienced practitioners, and we select the team specific to the individual that we're working with. And then from there, we'll determine a pathway and course of action going forward that lasts often for a long period of time. And I'm talking years, either with the individual or the family, or if it's with a group, with that particular group going forward.
Wow.
Wow.
So, and it's very iterative. One outcome will determine the next, rather than having it in a set trajectory that we have.
So when you say it could go on years, obviously not continuously. So they would come and you would do, maybe weeks or months out in a remote area, and then come back and that kind of cycle. Is that right?
It really does depend on the individual or the group that we're working with. It can be, have that initial engagement, and then from that we'll agree that actually, okay, every month now we're going to do 4 days with you every month, or we're going to do actually a period of 2 weeks for every 6, or we're actually going to say we're going to recommend that you come for us for 5 days, but actually you're going to stay here for another 15, and we're going to continue to work through. We're going to bring people in specific to you, and we'll fly people in from wherever to make that happen. So here in Scotland, you might have somebody who's come up from London, somebody's over from Amsterdam, somebody else has flown in from Spain, who are specialists in that particular field or that area that we're addressing with that individual. So we make sure that it's specific to them, and that's the whole point with that kind of bespoke program, that we then shape it according to them. And change takes time, so people who come in, we had one guy arrive, and within an hour and a half we'd gone for a walk from one of the places we use here in Scotland, crossed through the river, standing on the other side, and he's standing there and he's looking at me, and he's looking at this mountain, he's sort of rocking back and forward, and he said, "I'm just not feeling it." I said, "Are you okay?" He said, "Yeah, I'm just not feeling it." I said, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, I'm just not feeling the transformation." Like, fucking hell, you've been here for an hour and a half. It's not going to, what do you expect? This mountain's going to go like, right, mountain, transform me.
Reach right into
It
your
requires
soul.
endeavor. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's
I'm
not
going
working.
to fit in.
It's not working.
It's not working. I'm going to fit in transformation between sort of breakfast and lunch, and then I'm going to crack something else in the afternoon. This notion of hacking, and it takes time, and it takes openness, it takes commitment, it takes endeavor.
I don't want to be too prescriptive in this questioning, but meaning like that there has to be one identified issue. But it sounds like even people coming through their family. Is there the people who come to you, are they usually in a pretty tough spot? I mean, are you looking at people who are sort of in the throes of issues with the legal system or addiction or something like that? Or could people just sort of be at a spot in their life where they're looking to reimagine what's possible and understand who they are, and sort of, is it like that? Or is it more like somebody's really in a spot where they're in trouble and they need some specific help?
It's both. It's both. It's those that have they've come there at an inflection point in their life,
Okay.
or they want to improve performance, or they have an itch they can't scratch about who they are. They've sold a business. Some of my first clients were in that category, who'd sold a business and actually, felt exactly the same, and didn't understand why, having got to a particular point, with a pocket full of cash, and think, well, I still feel the same as I did, and I still have this sort of itch I can't scratch about myself. So, supporting them in addressing that, and making decisions and quality decisions going forward, and supporting them in that process as they move on, to those that you described, who are in crisis, or have issues that are really disruptive, not only for them but for their family, those that are in addiction and recovery. And we've worked with some of the world's leading treatment centers over the years, and aligned with them, working with their clients both in treatment and in recovery, and supporting them in a process and building a framework for their lives when they leave, and anchoring to habit, good behaviors, and building skills and supporting them in life skills, going forward in this kind of transition. Because, as I say, it's not what you're doing on the particular experience or the event, it's how you manage that transition and how you implement that learning into your life going forward. Otherwise it becomes just an anomalous, exceptional, exotic experience. So we work with both, and have, as I say, individuals that we can bring in, or teams that we can bring in, or work aligned with those clinical teams should that be required, to ensure that we have a coherent thread with what we're doing, and supporting them in challenging them, and still disrupting and dislocating in a positive way. It's an egalitarian approach. Everybody's treated in exactly the same way, regardless of whether you're of who you are, whether you're an Uber celebrity or not. We're all they're all treated in exactly the same way. And our programs are such that we're living together and operating together in an environment where you're around the table and you're swimming in a river in the morning, and you're doing your therapeutic session, maybe walking outside, or in a way where it's quite different to the normal environment. But we know and we understand that also creates significant, lasting, positive impacts for them, because it's anchored to an experience which is embodied.
That's incredible. All across the board.
Wow. All right. So it sounds like, you said you've worked on 5 continents. It sounds like you've got access to the world. How do you decide? I get it's bespoke and it's customized, but when you have that many options, give us a hypothetical on why you would take it to some faraway place that matches what this person might need or want.
I think there's sometimes a misconception that we're an adventure travel company that does a bit of coaching. It's not
Right.
actually travel is, and the experiences are purely a catalyst for change. So what we would do initially is we'd think about what is it that we need to do, how are we going to do it, who are we going to use to do this, and then where are we going to do it. So it's the destination is often last, and in some cases is irrelevant. Desert, mountain, jungle. It's what you do when you're there that's important. It's how you use that experience to leave a change and keep that flexibility that allows you to do that, rather than being sort of dogmatic in any approach. And it will often be something that we've identified. They might let slip that they've always wanted to do, or they've loved the cold and dog sledding. It's been something that might just be a tiny, a 2-second, well, more longer than that, a minute conversation, or that they, a great horsewoman, or they've always been fascinated by going to Africa, or how, or standing up and learning to sing, and whatever it might be. So finding a thread of an interest is key too, because that's going to pull them through when when it is challenging, because it will be at times, and change can be challenging. Any change can be challenging, and feel like in some cases like a death to change behaviours. So you need to have some interest to pull people through, and that's often those things that they enjoy doing. So we'll ask them, what do you enjoy doing? What have you always wanted to do? Or where would you like to go? Or what place intrigues you? And so trying to incorporate that in. But they generally, particularly for, well, as much as possible, we don't tell them what they're going to do, where they're going to go. They'll find out when they get to the airport if they're flying somewhere. Pull out the ticket and think, I'm going to Mongolia, or I'm going to Guyana,
Oh my God.
Wherever that might be. And if it's in the UK or Mallorca and on a program, again, just not telling them what's happening the following day. Don't worry about what's coming next. Let us worry about that. You just focus 100% on what's in front of you right now, and give that and give that your all, even if that's doing nothing. Because otherwise there's a wish to know and this illusion of control. So don't worry about that. It also allows us to change things. We could keep doing what's working and what isn't, rather than them thinking, weren't we going to go and do something on Thursday? We're going to go somewhere, or we're meant to be in this village. And so take people's watches off, because I remember it was one of my first clients in the jungle saying, well, we meant to be at this village at 2 in the afternoon, and it's 4. I was like, what difference does it make? What else are you doing? We're in the middle of the jungle. Give me a watch. The world is that playground in that sense, and using your imagination and being courageous and taking people to places that they wouldn't perhaps normally go to, or being in situations that are unfamiliar, and it might be doing things that they're frightened of. Who are you? Fundamental questions that we would ask. Who are you?
Yeah.
Why are you here? What's your purpose and function in life? What are you frightened of? What do you enjoy doing? How do you want to be remembered? So through discussions that we might have around that, and we'll figure out those things that they want to do. So it might be doing things that they're actually frightened of, and where we can demonstrate using those experiences to physically represent the metaphors by which they've been living their lives. These ways of living, this thesis upon which your life is based, and demonstrating then, is this working or is it not? So we had a guy, actually did a motorbike trip in southern Africa from Cape Town to Victoria Falls, and most of it off-road, with a guy that I know who's like Mr. Adventure biking in southern Africa. And part of what we were doing was training to make sure that he was a motorbike. He was a motorbiker, so he done a bit of off-road, but we did some training with him with some of the BMW guys down outside Cape Town. Don't know if either of you ride motorbikes, but I'm sure some of you
on the back
do. Yeah. Yes. And part of that we were doing was like sort of obstacle drills. So the look up, stand up, open up, the mantra. So there's an obstacle, you look to your exit point, not at the issue or the obstacle, because you're right into it. You stand up, so lower your center of gravity and kind of face what's coming. And you open up, which is being loose on the bike so it can move, but also giving yourself power, which is counterintuitive for some if they've been riding on road. So look up, stand up, open up. Anyway, we were doing this thing, and it was a really steep sandy bank. It had like an hourglass constriction of bushes, and you had to get through this really tight space of bushes on this steep sandy bank, hammering up there. Anyway, this client, as I'm standing at the bottom, he's just going up and smashing into the bushes, and coming off his bike into the bushes, not making it through the gap. He must have done it about 5 or 6 times, and he stood up covered in dust, scratched face, his visor up. He had a stick sort of coming out of the top of his helmet, where between the visor. And he turned around to me and he said, I've been doing this all my fucking life. I've been doing this all my life. And I hadn't realized it till now. I've been seeing an obstacle and I've been just going at it. I've not been looking past the obstacle. I've been fighting my way through the obstacle, and I've not looked past it at all. And he said, it took me to come down here to do this, to recognize that, and to kind of feel what it's like. I'm a bit battered and bruised. I'm scratched to buggery, but I've been doing this all my life. So he's now got look up, stand up, open up on his desk on a little plaque. So you can then embody that, and he looks at that and thinks, that's when I was there with these scratched and bruised and battered, trying to get through
Oh my
this
gosh.
gap. So
It's like
that's why we
experiential
want to help
therapy to
people.
the max.
Yeah, it's embodying that, this kind of visceral embodiment of the experience and the learning that you can do by having those interactions, which is why they're key. And they can be small scale too. It doesn't have to be like that, but yeah, that's kind of how we would choose.
As I listen to you, I'm just putting myself in this position, and I'm imagining myself, doing one of these programs, and what I would bring, and what I would want to talk about, and what I would be absolutely fucking terrified of, which would be what I need to bring. And it scares me to death, right? I mean, that's the point. Is I don't want to go to those vulnerable places, even though I know I need to. So I'm just kind of thinking about what that would look like if I think about the experiences you had in the British Royal Military, and it's like you get pushed to these limits, and that's where you find yourself, and that's what you're recreating here. And I mean, who's not scared of that? I'm terrified of that. I mean, I'm scared of sharks and being eaten alive. You're going to throw me out exactly where that's a possibility, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I think get that, and that's finding the edges of oneself, and you don't want to push through, so you don't want to be so terrified you do nothing. You want to just hold in a particular space where you've got that growth, and it doesn't have to be perhaps making it sound like it's quite extreme. It's not necessarily. There's lots of periods for reflection and for integration and engagement, and okay, well, what does that mean now? And for you, sharks and swimming with sharks, and introducing a little bit and then doing a bit more, and building success, not just dropping you straight in with a great white without a cage to touch its nose, and so kind of building success, and then using that, why is it, where does that fear come from, and what else does that mean, and where else in your life are you, what's the great white shark in another area of your life, if there is one. That's the thing, that you having those experiences allows for those coaching questions, and it can be there's leaving people alone. I mean, we do a lot of things where we leave people on their own for a period of time in a structured way, and that can be terrifying because you're on your own with your thoughts. Whereas so often, you keep your thoughts at arm's length by using a phone and being distracted all the time, and by removing those distractions, there is nowhere you can go but with yourself, and doing that in a structured way. And that's often the most terrifying thing, is to be alone with myself and my thoughts, and to face myself and actions that I've taken or not, but then having the support in an environment where everybody's focused on you to address that particular issue. And that can be in a nice house here in the Highlands of Scotland, or in a villa in Mallorca, or on a boat off the Norfolk coast, or whatever it might be. So it doesn't have to be too extreme.
And obviously that's kind of, as listeners and on this surface level, that's the excitement, right?
And as a certified extremist yourself.
And as a certified extremist, that's where my attention span goes. But I totally get it. I also am a professional in the mental health world, and I understand that the value is the processing and the talking of it, and the understanding and the awareness. And that is where the value is. And, it's the experiences, and then the unveiling and the uncovering and the digging into why that was a valuable experience. That is the fascinating part, and that is where what lends itself to your team. And that's, I don't know, that's just the fascinating piece of this entire mission, is this team that you've put together of these professionals that come in and make sense of all of these experiences. I love it. I want to do it. What's the discount code?
I'll send it to you afterwards.
Yeah.
It's really cool. I mean, it sounds a little bit manipulative when I think about it this way, but I think as a therapist doing talk therapy, you sort of sit with people and learn where they are, and kind of hopefully see some openings for them that they maybe haven't seen yet for themselves, and then go back and sort of, I had a supervisor once who said sort of like you have to be with that person and walk with them on that path, even though you may see in advance that they're capable of getting to that space. You can't just sort of say like, I'm over here, it would be great for you, you could come join me here. You really have to go back and walk with that person and allow for them to redirect if that's not the right direction and things like that. And I think hearing what you all are doing, it's really such just an experiential version of that, right? Like talking to people, understanding where they are, seeing possibilities. If you were in this experience, I think that might allow you to reimagine or gain a deeper understanding of how you view the world in this way that's potentially creating some sort of, I don't know, barriers for you or something like that. And then constantly reassessing as they go, right? Like, well, actually something new came up and that's something completely different than we understood before about how they look at the world or the challenges that they're constantly encountering. It's just really cool to hear how you guys are doing it in such a way that incorporates so many therapeutic techniques, frankly.
Yeah, and I think your point about walking the path, you can physically walk the path with them, and we're out doing it. So you were out walking the path whilst we're talking with them. It's that sort of Aristotle's Lyceum's peripatetic philosophy.
Yeah.
Moving your body and moving your mind, and the impact that has for them. So doing that, and you can actually then, as I say, physically demonstrate. So, and we change tempo. So you might be outside, and then you'll be inside by the fire with a much more sort of normalized therapeutic environment, and bringing in whoever it is that we believe can help. And everybody needs something different. There's no one methodology or modality that fits all, and so having people that can utilize a number of those or have a significant experience or a particular story that we're always looking for the slightly unusual in the team makeup too, who have that applied experience that they can bring. Very often they themselves in recovery or have lived through that, and can speak from a position of strength and experience, and are happy doing it. Not everybody's happy doing that kind of thing in the middle of the desert. So taking your bespeckled bow tie wearing Swiss psychiatrist with his tweed jacket and sticking him in the middle of the jungle is not always what they want to do. So not everybody's happy with that, and are relatively unboundaried sometimes too, because you're living with them. Sorry, go ahead.
No, so talk therapy can be based on what that particular person or group's needs are, but sometimes talk therapy is part of what's sort of in this package of their experience. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So, and coaching and ongoing coaching. Some people come and they have an experience with us, and actually, I've talked about things that are relatively high touch or quite intense, but actually there's quite a lot of low touch where they'll come and have an experience, say, that 5 days, perfect, or those 2 days, absolutely brilliant. Just now, a bit of coaching follow-up would be really good to just implement some of that learning and support me through that process. And sometimes that can go on for a period of time where, months or in some cases years, but just having that sort of ongoing support. So for us, it's about everybody being once they're part of have been on an experience, they're part of the organization and part of our sort of life library of experiences and us in there. So, this connection that we maintain with them. And my first client I'm still in touch with, and that was 13 years ago, and we see each other. In fact, we're going on a motorbike trip later this year, just he and I, to Chile.
Wow. Do you see this expanding further out to more and more demographics?
Yes, I do. I also, I recognize the kind of skills required to build or come up with the idea and the creativity around the programs are not necessarily the skills to build and grow an organization to scale. But yeah, we want to work with more people. We want to have impact over greater and different demographics. We have started increasingly working or being asked to work with younger and younger people. And I think that's something that is slightly alarming in terms of the issues that they face or are facing, and the severity of those issues at quite a young stage, and the complexity of those. And so I think that's something that we're being asked to do and are doing and have been doing. I think working in different geographies too. We've done some large scale long-term projects in the Middle East for groups out there of youngsters, of youth. So yeah, to be able to offer and do that more, absolutely. Clearly, I can't clone myself, unfortunately, but
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, and building teams around that. But that's certainly something that we want to do, and will do. Yeah, going forward.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, early on we were discussing, or Charlotte asked the question, is whether there's a majority or not, what's the difference in who's reaching out to you? Or is it people with problems, or is it people that are looking to grow? And I know there's probably some gray area in there as well, but I could see, my family unit, while we don't have a bunch of issues and a bunch of problems, we would love an experience like this to grow and learn more about ourselves and boost us forward into life. That sounds like somewhat of a sweet spot. I mean, we would do it.
yeah. Yes. Yeah. No. Indeed, and we have done, and continue to, and we'll work with more families in that regard too. And working with the individuals and then with the group and supporting them. It's a bit like a jigsaw piece. You take out one piece of the jigsaw and change that shape, then it doesn't fit back in again. So we need to change sort of everybody in a positive sense, and then be reshaped in some way. So yeah, I mean, that's certainly something that we have done and will continue to do. And increasingly, to your point, I think when I first started, it was more around a sort of want rather than a need, and increasingly over time it's become a need and more acute, and increasingly the conversations that we're having are around those with needs, and sometimes quite acute and immediate. So that's been an increasing trend, and as I say, one of people being younger and younger.
I mean, with it being so customized and comprehensive, I imagine there's quite a high barrier to entry financially. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, that's all relative, but yes, I mean, I would say that it is expensive, or it is a cost which then reflects the level of attention and the intensity of the program, and the fact that it's completely bespoke in a number of other environments. But we also do group based work. We do work that's related, so that's a lower barrier to entry in that sense, and so we can do group based work. And we also have some other kind of shorter events that we would run that are essentially sort of a taster type.
When you say group based, is that sort of like, we've got a small, maybe we're a startup company, we could not do this.
No, we're doing it. We're doing it.
You would hate being out there with me. But
maybe you need it.
Let's say, well, I probably do need it, but I think that you could just do like a much more extreme version than I could. But let's just say, like we had a small business team of 4 people or something. Is that the group setup, or is it sort of like I'm looking to join a group and I may be placed with several people that I don't know, but you've decided that this group has some dynamic that may work?
Yeah, so it's both. We would curate it so it would work, or 4. Try and do it in multiples of 4. 4 or 8. Generally, not go higher than that. Maybe to 12. But then that's a sort of self-supporting group that you can do quite a lot with. But yeah, 8 would be the kind of sweet spot for us in terms of a group. And yeah, I mean, the kind of the impact that we have in that time, and about the cost associated with it, it's the quality of the time and the quality of the people that we put into that, and the impact that you have over a pretty short period of time versus 10 years of ongoing therapy, where you're maybe seeing somebody once every few weeks or once a month, where you can really shift the dial. For us, I mean, one of the things that we use, sort of analogy around compass bearing, finding out that compass bearing that you're on, and if you're a few degrees out over time, you end up a long way from where you want to be, and you can demonstrate that quite easily on a boat or out in the mountains. And so about us bringing, in terms of shifting that dial, bringing people back onto their compass bearing in terms of their values, those visceral non-negotiables that you need to have in your life to make your life what it is. So doing that over a very short period of time, and then giving them the skills where they can bring themselves back on too, so they're living a life aligned with their values, rather than being misaligned and lost somewhere in a metaphorical miss
Yeah.
and bog,
Yeah. Oh, I like that idea that the longer it goes on, the further off course you're getting.
Yeah.
Do you do these in America?
We've done a few, but not many. Actually, it's one of the, to your point about growth, it's one of the areas that we would look to grow into. I mean, we have American clients that will come to us in wherever it is that we're running them, but will come here to the UK or into Europe. We've done a few things in America, but not many. But yeah, it would be somewhere that we want to go.
Huh. Well, let's discuss that sometime.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, where is it you live again?
Yeah.
Calum, this is absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for your time. We're going to have to wrap it up here. You are, man, you're just a badass. That's all I got. I like to describe my guest with multiple words, but I'm just going to stick with badass. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for explaining everything. Thank you for going through your past. Thank you for going through some of your experiences that led you to where you are. We really appreciate it. We've got one final question, which is kind of what we call the power question. Calum Morrison, why do you care?
Yeah, so why I care is because I've been in a situation where I've been completely sort of lost and unraveling, have been so far off my compass bearing that the story that I told myself about my life and the reality of the life that I was living was so divergent. The person when I looked in the mirror, not necessarily recognizing me as an individual, and I was so far off my values, and so far on a different bearing, and no amount of money in the world can medicate against the way that you feel. And the story that you tell yourself and the story that you tell others being so different. And actually, it was I just felt myself unraveling. I remember being in a particular experience where I felt myself sort of physically unravel, like somebody taking the hem of a cable knitted jumper and was pulling me apart thread by thread. And as I was walking, and barely sort of made it to the other side of this bridge that I was on, and didn't know where to go for help, didn't know who to speak to for help, probably incapable of asking for help because of some elements of my background and thinking that I should be able to fucking work it out for myself, and spent a lot of time sitting on a beach. In fact, the beach that I talked about at the beginning, with a notepad and pen. I remember when I came back from that particular experience, I was abroad at the time, and my wife looking at me and just saying, whatever the fuck it is you have to do, just go and do it, because we can't live in this particular way. So I notepad and pen on a beach in the north of Scotland, trying to sort of unpick those threads to then pull those together in some sort of coherent whole, and then recognizing that actually, what is the point of stories are only of any value if you share them, and I wasn't sharing them with anybody. And we see ourselves in other stories. We dream stories when we sleep, and for me it was about sharing those, or sharing that experience, and giving a vehicle for sharing those experiences with others. And friends of mine that I'd met who were kind of lost were at a particular age, and particularly it started with men, men of a particular age, where those normal measures of success had kind of not been reached and were falling, or had fallen by the wayside. They didn't know who they were, and it was about how to support them. So that's how it started. And then it's, you have this ability to create these experiences that then have enormous impact, and that then the effect of that impact on some of those individuals we work with who run huge organizations or big family businesses, that has multiple effects on those that they work for. And that's what drives me. It's the impact that we can have, and the support that we can have, and the positive engagement that we can have with those individuals, and seeing that within them, and then the outcome of that. And it can be challenging and it can be difficult, and for us too. But that's why I do what I do, and the ability to do it in amazing places, and show people that, and show them another way of living, and another way of thinking, and creating a new story, and a story where they have a blank page and they're holding the pen. It's not being written for them by somebody else, but they're writing it themselves. So for me, that's what always drives me, and has always driven me. It's been a curiosity that I've had about people and places, and for me, manifesting itself in a way that then supports them. I'd got to a point where I was thinking, well, what's the point of my life and these experiences that I've had, and what am I going to do with them? Because otherwise they're just a collection of things. And so yeah, using them to effect, and I don't like being the center of attention. I don't necessarily like talking about myself, and I enjoy doing what I do because the focus is on others, and I can put that focus into them, and be selfless about that.
Beautiful. You're an inspiration, Calum. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you. And I've never been called a badass before, so some of my military friends probably
well, that you
will
are.
laugh that.
Yeah.
My children would take the bad off the front. I think would be that probably a better way of describing me. But no, well, thank you, and a huge pleasure, and look forward to meeting you in person at some stage, either over the other side of the pond or here.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. The information and opinions shared on this podcast are solely those of the host and guests and are not a substitute for medical advice. If you feel like you may need professional help, here are some resources. Visit Patrick Balsley's practice, sanacounseling.com, Robbie Shaw's practice, eventiderecovery.com, or visit theblanchardinstitute.com.